But you know, they're fun.
We all thought it was great. Tom Landry hated it.
Why didn't the Packers have a nickname? Because Vince Lombardi was there.
From the leather helmet era to modern times, nicknames have been a catchy and colorful part of the game.
Thanks, Mean Joe.
The refrigerator.
The Catawba Claw.
The Boss. That's pretty cool.
I sort of like Crazy Legs.
Crazy Legs Hirsch. Think that name look okay, I'm Brett.
Stadiums have nicknames, or at least they used to.
I'll tell you what passes for a nickname today. Invesco Field, Synergy Field. That's why we don't get nicknames anymore for stadiums, because they've all been bought up.
Nicknames have to be said in John Facenda's voice. The Steel Curtain, America's team.
The real Steel Curtain dropped into place.
And of course, teams have nicknames.
You've got the no-name defense and the over-the-hill gang. The fearsome foursome. The Fab Five. Oh, that's basketball.
It's good for the fans, and probably I think the players enjoy it. A good nickname will last forever.
Since we don't have forever, we'll have to limit our show to the category of team nicknames. If you're scoring at home and have a different top 10, that's okay. Our show won't be lacking for opinions.
I think the frame of reference to nicknames in the old days was from a higher IQ level. Now it's all this garbage.
The number 10 nickname of all time. The Monsters of the Midway.
One of my favorite nicknames is the Monsters of the Midway.
Nobody knows what the hell Midway means, so a little air of mystery in there.
And when you get back to the word monsters, maybe some of that came from the fact that Emlyn Tunnell maintained that the Bears used to add extra padding to make themselves look bigger.
The Monsters looked big, played big, and had the big guy on the sidelines. Papa Bear, George Halas.
He was the founder of the National Football League. Can you imagine that? The founder of the league, the head coach, the owner, and the whole deal.
The Bears were the most penalized team in the league.
They played both ways, 60 minutes, offense and defense.
You can't help but like George Halas. I love George Halas.
From 1940 to 1943, they won 3 out of 4 NFL championships, and then they won another one in 1946.
They were the Monsters. There was nobody could beat them.
That moniker defined what they were about as a team. They were the big bad Bears.
I mean, they've never been a pretty team. They've never been a team that you would ever call a finesse team. These guys, they did have a big, strong, ferocious team.
Since Monsters of the Midway has been around for half a century, our number 10 nickname might be nearing its expiration date. Indeed, should a name that started in the Halas era still get some lovey today?
The Monsters really referred to the team of the 40s, but it's such fun to say the Monsters of the Midway that every time the Bears had a good team, that would come back.
That was terrific if you were winning. 1968, we were 1-13. You know, we had champagne in the locker room when we wanted to toss it a coin.
Hooray! Roses are red and violets are blue. If you got any sense, you'll keep Butkus away from you.
Dick Butkus, Mike Singletary. They too were Monsters of the Midway.
At every stage, from those days through the 60s into the 80s, when they were good, you could call them the Monsters of the Midway and it fit.
The number 9 nickname of all time. The Over the Hill Gang.
In 1971, George Allen was named the head coach of the Washington Redskins.
Today starts a new era.
Bob, why'd you drop it?
Personally, I don't like long hair, and I don't like long sideburns.
And since Allen believed children should be released and not heard, Redskins Sparks soon resembled a 55 and older community.
He just traded away all of his draft picks, and and just brought in a whole bunch of these veteran players. And in his first year, the Redskins were a winning team. Next year, they were in the Super Bowl.
Let's do this. Let's have 3 cheers for the Redskins.
There's a guy, he's not too old. What is he, 34? One of the youngest guys in the team.
He hated rookies. He didn't think a rookie could do anything but make a mistake.
We're going to have an all-veteran team. There would be no rookies, and that's the way it should be.
If it were up to George Allen, there wouldn't have been a draft because he didn't want a single rookie on his roster.
So if it meant mortgaging the future by trading all the draft picks in the following draft, he didn't care.
With 5 playoff appearances between 1971 and 1977,
Billy Cover, perfectly on target.
the over-the-hill gang didn't fly under the radar.
Coach Allen has inspired these men.
I'm a native Washingtonian and can't remember ever having a winning team in anything.
Following the Redskins became the fashionable thing along the Potomac.
George Allen's team-building philosophy and his personality were considered unconventional. Indeed, the over-the-hill gang's coach was over the top with his idiosyncrasies.
He was so peculiar in everything he did. His lunch had to be prepared a certain way. He was very detailed.
And because he had these older players, George had the thermometer of every single meeting room set at 64 degrees so that nobody would fall asleep.
They knew they were unwanted by the rest of the league.
It took a lot of cast-offs.
They played with a chip on their shoulder.
Just remember this, 40 men together can't lose.
It was a very gregarious team that sort of celebrated the fact that they were not spring chickens.
Our number 9 nickname of all time was fun while it lasted, but the over-the-hill gang soon went over a cliff.
So, hey, Frank. All right. That's okay.
It is a young man's game. Later in the season, physically, they just couldn't do it.
In the playoffs, they never really played as well as they did during the regular season.
So the ending, of course, wasn't as fun.
Come on, we got to get going. Come on, let's go. Let's go.
I don't know what his plan was, other than just trying to win for right now.
And hell, we don't care how we win as long as we win.
He was the only coach who believed in that system. George Allen got away with that because George Allen was a legendary figure.
Stay tuned to Top 10 Nicknames and find out which team got no respect.
We're kind of like Rodney Dangerfield.
Name.
Some nicknames, like Iron Mike Ditka or Billy White Shoes Johnson, just seem to fit.
Bronco Nagurski is one of the great names. By saying his name, you have a pretty good idea of how he played.
Some are oxymorons, like Bullet Bill Dudley, who was slower than a speeding bullet and slower than most defensive players.
Smurfs I didn't like. It's not a football term.
Smurf 1 and Smurf 2 back into the game.
Are you really serious about all this Hollywood stuff?
You either call somebody like that damn fool or Hollywood.
Oh, no, Jane. It's a mere myth.
Deacon is a nickname that gave me clear identification as a human being, which is from the public relations side of this game you have to give some thought to.
Ed Too Tall Jones is a computer's printout of the ultimate quarterback's nightmare.
My favorite nickname for any of our players was Kenny Anderson. We called him Candlelight because basically one blow and he was out.
Other nicknames are just plain awful.
The tough Steelers secondary, nicknamed Trackdown Incorporated, intercepted 3 passes for the second game in a row.
But the worst nicknames are simply inappropriate. Take Byron White, an NFL running back and Supreme Court justice, who had a nickname that no man should take sitting down.
The Wizard's a great nickname. I mean, I think in today's day and age, it might be considered politically incorrect. I don't think anybody could be called Wizard today. But back in the day, Wizard was a good name.
The number 8 nickname of all time, the no-name defense.
That's a name that was given to us by Tom Landry. He referred to us in an article. It's just a bunch of no-name guys that I don't know much about.
But the Dolphins didn't mind. They knew the name of the game was winning.
No Name was the perfect moniker, and they loved it. They played off of it.
The no-name thing they sort of wore as a little bit of a badge of honor.
It was the number one defense in the league.
Ultimately, it worked against them. Only one of those guys went to the Hall of Fame, and that was Nick Buoniconti.
That group of players collectively may have been as good a group on defense as there has been.
You have the steel curtain, the purple people eaters, but this might have been the greatest defense of all time.
They are, to this day, the only undefeated team in the Super Bowl modern-day era.
Our number 8 nickname of all time is both memorable and accurate. The Dolphins had lots of players in on the tackle, but no one player got the credit.
The Miami Dolphin defense in those days was designed to help and to give help. Everybody knew what their job was.
You never saw a guy take a chance. You never saw a guy freelance. Everybody went where they were supposed to be on every snap.
To me, they stood for what is the best about the game of football, and that is unselfishness, teamwork, intelligence.
They didn't make mistakes. They didn't give up the big play. You know, they made the other team earn it and take a long time to earn it.
For whatever reason, they feel like historically they haven't gotten enough respect. And they believe that very strongly, and they believe it to this day.
There's still no respect. We're kind of like Rodney Dangerfield. We don't get no respect.
We did a poster of our defense wearing these silly-looking Lone Ranger masks.
Yeah, I want to go, let it go, guys. You know, let it go.
He spins, tries to get the handoff away. Hernandez comes in and deals the ball.
We were one heck of a butt-kicking football team.
The field goal makes it 17-0, 17-0.
When you think of the Miami Dolphins, what's the image that comes to your mind? It's not the no-name defense. It's Garo Yepremian's blunder.
Garo Yepremian lost his head and tried to throw a pass.
By the time that comedy of errors was over, I really wanted to kill him.
Their win in Super Bowl VII capped a perfect season, but the no-name defense still carries a chip on their shoulders thanks to a botched chip shot field goal.
It rankles a few of the fellas.
Coming up on Top 10 Nicknames, which coach was the mad scientist on offense?
Light years ahead of everybody else. He was always thinking of how to expand the passing game.
This city was once nicknamed
To the public, Paul Hornung was known as the Golden Boy.
Number 5 is the Golden Boys.
In the locker room, they called him Goat Shoulders. And Jimmy Taylor, for some reason, was called Duty Bird.
Jarring Jim goes hiking through the Vikings.
Jimmy Taylor himself had a problem with names. And he couldn't remember, believe it or not, some of his teammates' names, so he would call everybody Roy. Hey, how you doing, Roy? Hey, Roy. I remember when I was up there as a cameraman. Hey, Roy, how you doing today? What are you guys going to shoot?
The number 7 nickname of all time, Air Coryell.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Air Coryell and your pilot, Dan Fouts, welcome to San Diego.
I thought Air Coryell was one of the greatest nicknames ever.
He's going for Jefferson. He's got it. Touchdown. He wants a touch.
I wanted them to call it Air Fouts.
Air Coryell knocks out the backfield.
It was a very apt phrase because it was Air Coryell.
Don Coryell, man, he just came out slinging. He wanted his quarterbacks to come out slinging.
When you think about Air Coryell, you got to kind of go back to San Diego State, which is where this whole thing began, and then to the St. Louis Cardinals.
The St. Louis version of Air Coryell in the early 70s featured the likes of Ahmad Rashad and Mel Gray. But when Coryell was hired by San Diego in 1978, he turned them into the Superchargers.
That team gave the town exactly what they wanted. The lights were just on full time with that offense.
It was an offense that led the league in passing 6 straight years and was only limited by the imagination of its head coach.
Don Coryell is kind of like the mad scientist.
always concocting stuff.
He was always thinking of how to expand the passing game and the offense in general. I mean, this guy was a genius.
There is no end to the things that the San Diego offense can do.
It wasn't the first system, but it was probably the most advanced system in the idea of isolating players on defense, of moving your piece on the board and getting it matched up against a weaker piece on the other side of the board, and then exploit that matchup.
Our number 7 nickname of all time certainly had the pieces. With Dan Fouts in the cockpit,
he was such a smart quarterback.
Once we start scoring, no telling when we'll stop, huh?
I mean, he got the ball after the receivers, bing.
Charlie Joyner on one wing.
He was so good that when our coaches were teaching the younger players how to run routes, they would say, watch Charlie. That's how you run that route.
And John Jefferson on the other.
When he came in the National Football League, people said, put his name on the first ballot Hall of Fame.
He had a tremendous hunger for the ball. If he was going to be around it, he was going to get it.
There was no shortage of options, including Chuck Muncie, James Brooks, and Wes Chandler. But what really made Air Coryell soar was the presence of tight end Kellen Winslow.
Winslow was the X factor. This guy reinvented the tight end position.
He was the first super fast, super athletic tight end. He changed the mold completely.
Everybody equates a passing team with a finesse soft team. Well, nobody called Kellen Winslow soft. At least they didn't call him soft twice. He would catch the ball, and then he had an attitude that he was going to try to hurt somebody after it.
Winslow's toughness was never questioned, though the same could not be said for Air Coryell, which, despite its success, never made it to the Super Bowl, but still was a great way to fly.
The number 6 nickname of all time, the greatest show on turf.
I like that, except my desk kept screwing it up and writing Earth in there.
It may be tough to get right, but our number 6 nickname of all time certainly was a perfect fit.
Greatest show on turf is perfect because we were built to play on turf.
So explosive, so many weapons.
We were a very fast, quick, explosive team. And when we were on AstroTurf, it was magnified.
That team, that personnel, that scheme, in that building and on that field, they were lethal.
From 1999 to 2001, the Rams offense lit up the city of St. Louis and the NFL record books, becoming the only team to ever score over 500 points 3 consecutive years.
It was fun, really. We were maybe a little cocky.
The best on 3, 1, 2, 3, the best. The feeling was just like it was easy.
It's not supposed to happen like this, Jack. It's not supposed to be this easy for an offense to score like this.
The funny thing is that we all knew it wasn't that easy, but it felt like it.
And it doesn't get any better than this.
I thought it was great to finally have somebody come out and just say, you know what, I don't care what you do. This is what we do. Try and stop this.
They were just relentless, and March just kept attacking and attacking and attacking.
Just keep attacking them, Michael.
You weren't just going to lose. There was a good chance you were going to get embarrassed in the process.
The battle that was going on was, who's the MVP of the team? Is it Kurt Warner or is it Marshall Faulk?
Game on the line, who we going to? Y'all know who we going to.
Falk arrived in St. Louis in 1999 and immediately took center stage.
He was the reason that we were the greatest show on turf.
Marshall's one of those guys that could transfer what his eyes see to his feet and respond without even thinking about it.
When we talk about great players and multi-purpose threats, Marshall Faulk is at the top of the list.
Absolutely remarkable.
I remember one time we were playing, I think, at Cleveland Browns. He made a play. He went all the way with it. 40, 50 yards for a touchdown. And my thought was, he just scored. I don't think we blocked anybody.
Marshall Faulk breaks a tackle to the 20, heading to the outside of the 10, to the 5. Touchdown, Rams!
Hey, Marshall, we didn't block anybody. We didn't block anybody.
That was a hell of a run.
Superman, number 28. Check him out.
If Falk was Superman, then Warner was Clark Kent. In 1999, the mild-mannered quarterback was minding his own business until a preseason injury to starter Trent Green thrust him into the spotlight.
Warner takes, throws the end zone, touchdown, Rams!
He came up from nowhere had a great sense of timing, a great sense of rhythm on his throws. He had it all. I mean, Hall of Fame.
The Rams ringmaster capped his storybook season by putting on a show in Super Bowl 34.
Warner back to throw. Rainbows the far sideline, and it is caught by Isaac Cruz. Makes a move to the 30, 25, 20, and they won't catch him today. Touchdown Rams! St. Louis, the gateway to the West, is now the gateway to the best football team in the world.
Coming up on Top 10 Nicknames, Confessions of a Network Reporter.
I loved purple as a kid. That was my favorite color. I want to embarrass myself.
Before we continue our countdown of Top 10 Nicknames, let's recap the list so far.
Number 10. The Monsters of the Midway were no Cinderella story. Number 9. The Over the Hill Gang was young at heart.
What is he, 34? One of the youngest guys in the team.
Number 8. The no-name defense had no losses when they won Super Bowl 7. Number 7. You are now free to throw the football with abandon.
On behalf of Air Coryell and your pilot, Dan Fouts, welcome to San Diego.
Number 6. There was nothing artificial about the Rams' offense.
Greatest show on turf is perfect because we were built to play on turf.
The number 5 nickname of all time, the Purple People Eaters.
Minnesota's football team already had a ferocious name.
It was a natural here. Vikings connotes ferocity, pillage, all that sort of thing.
But when they developed a dominant defense in the late 1960s, another moniker was needed. It's our number 5 nickname, the Purple People Eaters.
Not bad. Sounds too much like a kiddie show, but not bad.
It's Prince in this era, right? I mean, it's Barney for those of us who have kids. But it's something that in an odd way stuck for these guys.
When you came in there as an opponent, knowing that this was their reputation, Purple People Eaters, it was an intimidating thing.
I even saw some history made. I saw Bud Grant smile. If there is a common trait among Norwegians, it would be relative stoicism, unless aroused.
One thing you can be sure of, when the Vikings come to play, they don't run away from violence.
Purple People Eaters is a nickname that seems out of step with the flannel and fur hats of the North Country. But it was soon synonymous with the Vikings defense and their front four in particular.
They won because of the dominance of that defensive line.
The Viking front four is quite simply one of the best in pro football history.
They did devour teams by killing them up front.
And if the People Eaters didn't beat their opponents, the weather turned them purple.
I think psychologically the fact that Grant wouldn't let them have anything warming.
The other teams would be huddled against these probably less than modern heaters.
It was cold, it was miserable, but it was their advantage.
And the fans absolutely loved that. Didn't hurt that the fans might have had something keeping them warm also.
The number 4 nickname of all time, the Fearsome Foursome.
During the same era that fans were freezing in Minnesota, sunny California was the home to our number 4 nickname.
I think most people remember the Fearsome Foursome. Deacon Jones, if he's not the greatest defensive end that's ever played, I mean, he's certainly in that group. Merlin Olsen is one of the great defensive tackles ever. And Rosie Greer was an all-pro. And Lamar Lundy at the other end was no slouch.
We were huge. I was the smallest guy. I'm 6'5", and I weighed 275. And the hugeness hadn't got to the game at that point. So it made us really unique and different.
And that Fearsome Foursome was one of the first to loop and stunt and do a lot of different creative things.
You saw a defensive line take over a game. They were dictating to the other team.
When things were cooking for us, we were a fearsome group.
the man most responsible for making the foursome fearsome was Deacon Jones.
I believed in intimidation. My whole delivery, my whole existence was about intimidation.
When you talk about great pass rushers, Deacon Jones.
Deacon Jones was an 8-time Pro Bowler, a Hall of Famer, and the man who invented the nickname for throwing the quarterback for a loss.
Sacking the cornerback is just like you devastate a city, or you cream a multitude of people.
He loved watching the reporters' mouths drop open when he would say something just outrageous.
I wanted to put as much fear into his heart and as much pain on his back as I possibly could.
We want to make you hate carrying this ball. Not 1 yard are we going to let them gain. And we'll stay here till Jesus comes. You understand what I mean? I came, I saw, and I did conquer.
And well before the lines between entertainment and sports began to blur, the fearsome foursome were the first crossover stars.
In the stands at their game were Hollywood celebrity types. That didn't go on around most of the rest of the National Football League.
They were really a West Coast, Los Angeles answer to the New York teams, if you will. They really brought the focus up to the West Coast.
We had Hollywood. We did national syndicated television shows.
And they even took it on the road. They created a nightclub act.
We worked with Bob Hope. We worked with Bing Crosby. We worked with Jimmy Durante.
Well, put them all together, and here at Pindick, we've affectionately dubbed them the Fearsome Foursome. And I was hoping maybe we could persuade you gentlemen to do one more song for us. Rosie, how about that? Thank you. Here we go.
We did the first shindig. We sang and danced on shindig. So it was a lot to the Fearsome Foursome. We played the football, but we had that strong Hollywood image, man. And it all worked together.
Next up on Top 10 Nicknames, did you ever hear the one about the
offensive linemen with pigs in front of them in tuxedos?
Lindsay Soto and...
Before we resume the countdown, let's look at some team nicknames that didn't make the cut. In 1977, the Orange Crush defense made a splash in Denver. The 49ers' $1 million backfield was a bargain at any price. The Aints chose paper over plastic.
It's so bad that you can't even watch, although we'll poke eye holes just in case somebody does something.
A decade after the no-name defense, Miami was infested by the Killer Bees, the nickname for a defense that boasted 8 players whose last names began with the letter B.
Dolphins are number 1. We got defense.
The number 3 nickname of all time, the Hogs.
Programs, Redskin programs. Oink, oink.
Pork is always a big topic inside the Beltway, but in the early 1980s, pork had nothing to do with government spending and everything to do with the success of the Washington Redskins.
The Hogs. You look at the skill position players, quarterbacks, all those pieces interchanged. What was the common denominator through most of the Gibbs Super Bowl teams was the Hogs.
That was the Redskins right there. That defined a football team.
Those Hogs were pretty special.
Our number 3 nickname blossomed into a brand, but the Hogs weren't born with marketing in mind.
It was Joe Bugle that gave him the nickname Hogs. Joe Bugle really earned the title of Boss Hog.
One day he said, let's go, you hogs down here, let's hit the sled.
I said, come on, you hogs, let's get down here. And they kind of got a kick out of it.
I love them hogs. I love them hogs. I love them hogs. Yeah, I love them hogs.
Tough, mental offensive line.
They played physical, nasty football, in-your-face football.
They're the butchers and we're the hogs. The thing they forgot is before a hog goes to the butcher, somebody got to kill it.
Membership in the Hogs was a privileged thing, and despite playing in D.C., campaigning wasn't allowed.
Through the key block. I wanted to be a part of it. You know, hey guys, can I get in? No, get out of here. I mean, they don't even do it in a nice way. They just tell you no. You can't be a hog.
It hurt.
Riggins has been named an honorary groundhog.
You couldn't become a hog unless you were John Riggins.
He had just this perfect personality to make the Joe Gibbs offense and that offensive line go. I guess he was the sizzle and the bacon to the Hogs, if that means anything.
The guy was 235 pounds. I mean, he'd knock you around like a 10-pin in a bowling alley.
Riggins is piling up the yard.
He was so loved by the Hogs, they knew if they could just maybe hold that block just a tenth of a second longer, John was going to get through it.
I left tight wing, 70 chip on white. Ready?
The Hogs' signature play won them Super Bowl 17.
Good hole. He's got the first down to the 40. He's gone. He's gone. First down, Washington Redskins.
Hogs was special because, think about it, nobody ever talked about the working man.
You looked at those 5 guys and you thought, I can picture them in a big mud wallow and somebody out throwing a pail of garbage into the mud wallow and 5, 6, or 7 of them getting around.
Root 'em out, root 'em out, root 'em out, Hog!
Our number 3 nickname also gave birth to a subspecies, the Hogettes.
Love them kids! Love them kids!
Now, they had a good marketing guy.
We looked up in the stands and saw what we heard were very successful businessmen up there cross-dressing.
I'm a retired naval officer.
I worked for the Department of Energy.
I work for the U.S. Postal Service in finance.
To this day, you can go and see grown men with pig snoot masks on.
I thought when we retired that these guys would hang it up, but they obviously love that cross-dressing.
The Hogs were the largest, heaviest, ugliest set of men I've ever seen in my life. And they prided themselves on it.
You hear a lot of these nicknames, the Purple People Eaters. They hated that name. They really did. But the Hogs, the guys embraced it.
If I would have said in 1982 that people would still be talking about the Hogs in 2007, I would have just said no way.
Next up on Top 10 Nicknames, what goes up must come down hard.
The idea of a defense is to bring someone physically down as fast as you can, and a curtain falling is a perfect sort of metaphor.
Astute viewers may have noticed a trend in our countdown. Only 2 of the top 10 nicknames were coined after 1980. So are nicknames a dying breed?
Peyton Manning, he doesn't have a nickname. Tom Brady doesn't have a nickname. There aren't any really good nicknames.
I think the bus, Jerome Bettis, may be the last great nickname in sports.
Wheels on the bus go round and round.
I think the frame of reference and nicknames in the old days was from a higher IQ level.
No internet, no sports talk radio.
Television, in many ways, has diminished nicknames.
Now it's all about something you see in some kid's game or a cartoon or some nonsense like that.
The number 2 nickname of all time, the Steel Curtain.
There's nothing more abrupt than a curtain falling on a production. The idea of a defense is to bring someone physically down as fast as you can, and a curtain falling is a perfect sort of metaphor.
The Steel City is home to the number 2 nickname of all time, and it was coined by radio homer Myron Cope.
Was a shovel pass here to me?
Myron said, we gotta name these guys something. They came up with the Body Snatchers was one. Then they had the Anvil Chorus, which was terrible. They ended up with Steel Curtain, and that stuck.
That has a dark, nasty, Darth Vader-like feel to it, the Steel Curtain.
It was really timely. It was the Iron Curtain. Obviously, we knew what that was in the 60s and 70s.
Churchill talked about there was an Iron Curtain coming down over Eastern Europe, referring to the Soviet Union.
The Steel Curtain and that team and that city. That was one of those moments in time when everything came together.
The Steelers not only won 4 Super Bowls in 6 years, they also led the league in alternative nicknames.
The fans had as many great nicknames as the team itself. The Steel Curtain is great, but you've got Jack Ham's Dobra Shunka, the Big Ham, Rocky's Flying Squirrels, Franco's Italian Army, Girella's Gorillas.
Bob Bubanek, the man in the gorilla suit, leads another faction of Steeler fans who have made place kicker Roy Girella their hero.
Whoever that visiting team was, they weren't just playing the Steelers that day. They were playing Pittsburgh.
50,000 people standing and applauding.
There were a few games where I thought, if we don't win this game, the fans are going to come out on the field and do it for us.
Two tight ends! Tight end left! Tight end off!
Fans may have fueled the fire, but the most important raw material in the Steel Curtain was Mean Joe Green.
Joe Green broke through to nail Staubach and caused a fumble.
Joe Green hated to lose football games more than he enjoyed winning.
Joe could do just about anything he wanted to do on a football field. I mean, he just actually was unstoppable and had a real nasty personality.
I know personally I'm probably the nicest guy that could possibly play the game. Serious. You don't believe that, huh?
Joe, in my opinion, was the player of the decade.
That is some kind of meat grinder that's rolling through the NFL.
They are the number 2 nickname of all time and possibly the number 1 defense in NFL history. But there's no consensus on who comprised the Steel Curtain.
On the wall, they had a large, huge banner that hung during that period. And it said the Steel Curtain. And it had just the 4 defensive linemen on it.
Defense came to the rescue as the real Steel Curtain dropped into place.
The Steel Curtain is LC, Joe Green, Ernie Holmes, and yours truly. And that's what it was. You can't change it. You can't deny it.
I don't want to offend Dwight and Ernie and Joe by assuming that I don't respect their Steel Curtain name, but I think we all are the Steel Curtain.
Stabler's back to throw, and it is intercepted.
When I think of the Steel Curtain, I have to think of Lambert. Jack Ham is part of that. Mel Blount is part of that.
Intercepted. Here we come, Mel Blount.
Those are 3 Hall of Famers that were a big part of that defense.
They had a great front four, they had great safety, they had great linebackers. It was really the defense.
Steelers are so great, and they play the best of all. His 5th shutout in 9 games. Ooh-wee. Number 1!
It was not so much what we did, it was the way we did it. And we'd kick your ass.
Coming up next, we reveal the number 1 team nickname of all time.
Losing weight clicked for me when I realized that...
Before we unveil the number 1 nickname, let's recap the list.
Number 10. You'd need a wooden stake to kill the monsters of the Midway nickname.
Every time the Bears had a good team, that would come back.
Number 9. The Over the Hill Gang was a team that ate their young.
We're going to have an all-veteran team. There would be no rookies, and that's the way it should be.
Number 8. They might have been anonymous, but the no-name defense also had an undefeated season. Number 7. Air Coryell didn't have a set schedule.
Once we start scoring, no telling when we'll stop.
Number 6. The greatest show on turf put up big numbers under the big top. Number 5. The Purple People Eaters didn't sound tough, but they played tough.
Sounds too much like a kiddie show.
Number 4. The Fearsome Foursomes Empire included their opponent's backfield.
I came, I saw, and I did conquer.
Number 3. Membership had its privileges for the Hogs.
I mean, they don't even do it in a nice way. They just tell you no. You can't be a Hog.
Number 2. If at first you don't succeed, keep trotting out nicknames.
They came up with the Body Snatchers, the Anvil Chorus, which was terrible. They ended up with Steel Curtain, and that stuck.
The number 1 nickname of all time, America's Team.
Beginning in 1965, the Dallas Cowboys made the playoffs in 13 out of 14 years. Back then, their nickname was next year's champs because most seasons ended in disappointment.
He's got the quarterback thinking he's into the touchdown, and the Packers are out in front. Oh, bless his heart, he's got to be the sickest man in America.
So after another close call in 1978, a young NFL Films producer wasn't willing to tell the same old story.
I think the disappointment of that Steeler loss made me look in a different direction than just a standard highlight. If you go through the season, show the offense, defense, I said there's got to be something more to take this sting out of this loss.
When we did highlight films then, they were usually titled more toward what the season was about. You know, gateway to greatness, on the edge of greatness.
It was the dawn of a new season for the Dallas Cowboys.
And what Bob saw was, you know, every place the Cowboys played, it really was a team that had fans on almost every stadium.
I saw all these fans in away stadiums. Hey, they're the most popular team in the country. How can I use that? Why don't we call them America's team?
They appear on television so often that their faces are as familiar to the public as presidents and movie stars. They are the Dallas Cowboys, America's team.
The name America's Team was a Madison Avenue moniker deep in the heart of Texas, and it spread across the land because they were the league's most popular team and featured the most popular player.
Not only were they America's team, but they had Captain America, the most glamorous player in pro football, and Roger Staubach.
Character, clean cut, you know, he had it all. You wanted your daughter to marry a Roger Staubach.
You know, I enjoy sex as much as Joe Namath. Only I do it with one girl.
There was something about that star that kind of symbolized America.
What can you say? It's just complete, total, utter domination.
We all thought it was great. Tom Landry hated it.
It just painted a big bullseye on the forehead of every Cowboy player.
It probably made it tougher for the Cowboys. Everybody looks up to this team, so if they're looking up to this team, let's knock them down a peg.
The Dolphins would say, wait a minute. We had a perfect season here. Why aren't we America's team? The Steelers would say, we're better than them. Why aren't we America's team?
It was disrespectful to the rest of the league. And guys resented it.
Hey, we just chopped liver down here in Houston. What the hell? You felt like, oh, God, we must kiss their garments before we go out here.
People hated us, or loved us, but you had an opinion.
Very rarely do you meet somebody and say, what do you think about the Cowboys? They're okay. You either love them or you hate them.
I know we resented it in Philadelphia. Hey, we'll pick America's team. You know, we're part of America, too. That's our attitude.
We want Dallas! Dallas! We hate you!
Now we bring those damn Cowboys next.
The stars on the roster and the stars on their helmet all aligned for America's team.
Dorsett, he's out to the 30. Draw play, Smith up the middle. At the 50, one more block, he might go. To the 5, cut to the right, cut to the left. Oh, he's going to score. Tony Dorsett.
They were there in the 70s, fell off in the 80s. They're back on top now.
Was it used in the 70s? Sure. Was it used in the 90s? Yeah. Was it used in the 80s? No. You know, we weren't called America's team when we were 1-15.
If you're not successful, America's team doesn't fit, right? America doesn't want that team that's losing.
Jersey sales tell you who is America's team. It's for so many years running, the Dallas Cowboys led the nation in sales.
World champions! Right, let's go! World champions!
It may be the most enduring of them all, but our #1 nickname had humble beginnings.
Meant nothing more to me than, hey, this is a catchy highlight title. I never knew that the Cowboys would take this, that it would last so long.
It still lives on. Tex Schramm is long gone. Tom Landry's long gone. Texas Stadium will soon be long gone.
And the Cowboys have taken the lead.
But yet, they still talk about America's team.
Not every team on our list has a Super Bowl ring, but their nicknames have granted them football immortality. You may subscribe to the notion that winning isn't everything, it's the only thing.